Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Woke by Accident podcast. I am your host, Jan Washington. This is a weekly chat about socially conscious topics impacting the culture. I would like to extend my gratitude in you listening to this podcast. It means everything to me, and I hope it is clear that this subject matter is so important to me. I care about our people, our future, and making a positive change in this nation. So, welcome to another episode of Woke by Accident podcast. Today we have a special guest, Crash Barbosa, who is a recording artist and social activist and influence from Los Angeles, California. I'm really excited to have Crash on the show today. He is someone who speaks his mind about the issues he is passionate about and has a great following on social media. He also comes highly recommended. Shout out to Jay. And welcome to the show, Crash.
How are you?
Oh, really good. So glad to have you on. And I wanted to find out about the things that you're working on and the things that you've been involved with. On your profile, you describe yourself as an anti racist. So I was curious for you to share more about that.
The definition, and to be very clear, right, of being anti-racist means you intervene if you see racism. You don't just
Mhm.
turn the other cheek. You don't just look the other way. You don't give it a pass. To be honest with you, last night I was actually out and I had a younger homie of mine with me, and somebody used a term as if it was okay, and I had to get involved, and I was like, it's not okay to do that. Like, I had to very directly intervene in that, and
Yeah.
very peacefully, and like just calmly be like, that created harm. And he's like, well, he didn't say anything. I'm like, he's not going to, but I'm going to, because that's what it is, and that's not okay. And the dude was like, I respect that, and like shook my hand and apologized. And so to me, being anti-racist means if you see anything racist, like, you have to actively dismantle that idea. Like, you can't allow it to exist around you. I love
Mhm.
when I see white people claim they're anti-racist, and then they go, hang out with their family members or even their boss, and they hear all kinds of hate speech and they just look the other way. And that, to me, that's
Right.
wild. That's not anti-racism. So anti-racism, very explicitly, to me, is a very direct intervention in racism. If you see racism, you're very directly intervening in it to make sure it does not exist. You're not giving it a safe haven and whatnot.
Definitely. Their silence speaks volumes, actually, I feel. So
Yeah.
kudos to you for doing that. What do you think about white people who say they don't see color or things like that?
Those people are racist,
Hmm.
because to say you don't see color is not only a neoliberal escape route from accountability or any type of, like, to me, it's a white lash response too. Like, it's a lot of older people will say things like that because that's always been a good way to say I'm not racist, but that's not really enough anymore, right? Where
Okay.
it's like, no one needs people's tears or guilt or fragility. They need help. They need your voice. They need your actions to speak your words. So like, when people are like, oh, I'm colorblind, and I think a lot of people are. It's like, to me, that's the Joe Biden, like, let's all meet in the middle and pass some infrastructure bills with no human infrastructure in it, and raise police funding, even though that's what we said we weren't going to do, and let's
Hmm.
double up on ICE, and let's just deflect accountability entirely. So to me, it's a very typical thing to hear from the white neoliberal, and it's really problematic. So my opinion on people who say that is that they're very, very racist, and their reason they're saying that is to deflect their racism. Otherwise, they would have a conversation about it, right?
Right. And then tell us about some of the social justice activism efforts that you've been involved in. I guess my audience may not be familiar, and I know I'm not feel familiar with everything that you've been involved with. I know that you've done some efforts with Initiate Justice, but what are some of the other social justice movement items that you've done?
I've worked with most nonprofit and non like government organizations that mean anything. I've worked with the ACLU. I've worked with
Mhm.
BLM, obviously Initiate Justice, as you said. I've also had to work with the white groups of abolitionists. There's like organizations of segregated like white orgs where they're like anti-racist, that they are using the Anne Braden program to train activists to be anti-racist and to teach them
Okay.
about abolition. I think it's strange though, because we're talking about white people, right, who have a whites only sign at their door for collective liberation, and no group that isn't white has anything only sign on their door. And so I've always brought up that that is problematic. So I no longer
Yes.
work with those groups, because to me, that's just, it's not progress. That's backwards movement. To me, it's wild. I don't see how that's helping anybody either, because it's keeping people in a state of fragility where it isn't productive, because they're not interacting with the people they claim that they're speaking for and advocating for. They never even had a conversation outside of something related to working with an organization, out in their lives outside of, a workplace setting, very literally. So to
Hmm.
me, that's problematic. And I don't see how that can continue and cycle into anything more than a festering, like, cycle of the best way to describe it would really be just, I would say, toxic fragility, where it's very
Yeah.
promoted to just, kind of be like, this is really hard on me. And like, it's like, but can you imagine what it would be like if you weren't white? You know what I mean? And so to me, like, it really isn't a pass on that. So that's how I feel about that. Other orgs I've worked with though is, I've worked with Amnesty. I think I said I've worked with the UN on a few things. I mean, I've worked with overseas orgs. I try
Wow.
to do as much as I can. If I'm asked to do something, I try to do it. And if it's not putting me over capacity, I will. And so yeah, I mean, I really, lately it's just been great to work with Initiate Justice, because that's where I feel most at home. Probably, like, that's where it feels most like it's a family as of right now.
Okay. And you mentioned the abolitionist movement. So you agree with that school of thought to abolish the prison system and
Policing prisons, I
yes.
honestly take it further than that. I want to abolish animal production. Like, I
Hmm.
think oppression should be intersectional at the level where we should be. I think there needs to be a larger conversation around the misogynistic rape culture that's promoted in America. Like, it's very femicidal in nature, so that's intersectional abolition to me. It's like we have to abolish that level of oppression. I think the
Okay.
court system needs to be abolished, to be honest, because the
Mm.
design of that system is very well designed to do what it does. And I don't think there's a way to rewire something that was designed to work exactly perfectly for very specific people. I think that's something that would have to just be worked out from scratch without 1776 ideas in it.
Mm. And that's a good point. I mean, like, how are you going to restructure or abolish prisons without doing anything with the court system, like you said? So that kind of goes hand in hand. It definitely would need to be reworked or something, if under that particular understanding. So that's interesting. What inspired you to get involved in this matter? All these organizations you mentioned, Amnesty and UN and Black Lives Matter, and just what it was inspiration for that.
Those were all different issues usually that I was working on, which is
Hmm.
interesting. So it's like with Amnesty, it was kind of the first thing I was doing. But that was the first time the ICE thing started to happen in the United States, or at least in California, where there was a lot of pushback around that, and it was really hard to get ICE out of California. This was
Yeah.
years ago. So that was when I was working with them. I worked at a lot of different campaigns before that. Even when I was a minor, like I did, Prop 8 organizing and like, protesting and stuff like that. And like I did a lot of things when I was in school that was very literally just organizing. So I think it's always been kind of part of who I am to put,
Hmm.
like, I'm not a bystander. So if I see something that's bad, I'm going to try to help. And that's just who I am. And so I think that kind of mixed with a lot of the ideas that I was raised with and not raised with, just as importantly, and my
Hmm.
own like quest for truth ever since I was a very, very young kid kind of guided me in a direction of that, where it was half, nature, half nurture. And I just ran towards every fire I saw my whole life, kind of.
Hmm. Now, you're also a strong advocate for mental health.
Yeah.
Why is this so important to you?
I'm disabled. So
Mhm.
I'm disabled due to having bipolar disorder, and I've been disabled since I was 25. Like I'm totally and permanently disabled, and it's invisible. A lot of people can't tell because I play to
Mhm.
my strengths. I speak and whatnot and what have you, right? And that makes me look very normal. It makes me look very social when I'm out in public and whatnot. And so that's why it's important to me, because there's a lot of people that are dying every day because they don't have help, and there's a huge level of medical apartheid that exists, and I mean that very
Mm.
literally, in our society. And that's another thing that needs to be abolished, is the medical industrial complex, because that's so oppressive in nature that it's not conscionable, you know what I mean? So it's like, I mean, the US prison system being the world's, or not the world's, but the United States, it's major mental health provider, is a
Mhm.
staggering statistic, and I don't think anyone should be okay with it, and no one's really talking about it. And so to me, mental illness is really important to break the stigmas down on, because the problem is, and this is a problem with patriarchy and other things as well, is that we can't talk about our feelings. We're told not to. We're told to be strong. We're told to move through things, and we're just weighing ourselves down and hurting ourselves. And people die. I mean, bipolar people are killing themselves all the time. I hear
Right.
about activists and organizers who are killing themselves in other states, and like, I'm not hearing a lot of organizations talk about that, and even the ones they work with. And it's just, to me, really tragic that there's an oversight like that, because it's like, where's the solidarity when people are dying because they feel like they're alone or they're isolated, right? And so to me, it's really important to advocate for mental health, because it's something people need to be aware of, but it's also something I want people to have treated with care, because that's the real difference. Like, if you look at somebody who suffers from mental illness, they're always 100% of the time either doing good or bad based on the kind of care they're getting. Whether it's, like, a doctor could be a neurologist and just tell them, this is what's wrong with your brain and live with it. Or a doctor could be like, here's what's wrong with you, but that doesn't make you wrong. It just means you have to be aware of this, and here's a caring way to approach it. And I think it's just more about humanizing people, right? And we're not doing that
Yes.
enough.
Mhm.
So, like, for me, that's very intersectional with everything in regards to social justice, in regards to solidarity and collective liberation and abolition, and everything we're all trying to strive for. I really love to point out how important it is that we acknowledge, disability. I see a lot of people talk about it on flyers the same way politicians will give it a quick mention when they're campaigning, but at the end of the day, 25% of the United States population is, on some form of disability.
They
And this
are.
is
Yeah.
something they really just brush over, like it ain't no big. And so to me, it's very important to advocate for, because people die and it's tragic, and it shouldn't happen. It doesn't happen like that in other countries where this is acknowledged.
Mhm.
And we also have a predatory, I mean, like, I'm ranting about that, like, illness and like the problems systematically with that, but it's
Mhm.
important to acknowledge, like, big pharma's role in this is really problematic. They're not creating cures, they're creating things that are still from the 70s and just rebranding them, trying to turn a profit, using humans as guinea pigs, very literally, and testing on prisoners. Like, we can't be okay with that. And
Right.
then, you're buying the same medication in France for what someone on Medicare here is going to pay for medication. Here, you're dead if you have medication that's expensive. Most of it is. I mean, it blows my mind. Being disabled, that's something I have, is Medicare. And so it's like, I'll look at a receipt for like a medication I'm prescribed, and I'm like, oh my God, you know what I mean? It will
Mhm.
be for something small too. It'll be like $1,200. I'm like, what kind of bracket are they running even at Medicare? That's something worth bringing up, where it's like, doctors say they don't, but they really do. Like, if they see that you have Medicare, they run the tab up. And I don't know who's talking to who on that,
Oh.
but they're like, yep, the government's paying for it. Prescribe the most expensive thing.
Okay, so it's definitely you see a relation there.
It's
It's
definitely, yeah,
not.
yeah.
Mhm. Interesting. I never thought about it that way. Wow, that's deep. That's really deep. Yeah, that definitely needs to be changed because that's problematic. Totally. Totally.
Yeah, it's a serious thing. And then, like, there's a lot no one talks about, because a lot of people don't know, and no one needs to know. It's like, no one needs needs to read the Americans with Disabilities Act. It's younger than I am, but like at the end of the day, there's a lot of things in there that are probably like people don't talk about. Where it's if you're disabled, you lose your health care if you have more than $2,000 in your checking account at one time for a consistent month. No matter who you are, they take your health care. And it's not about the money they give you or whatever, which is very little. So it's forced poverty at that point, right? Because you can't really work if you make a certain amount of money, they take your health care away. Like, so it's like you have to trust private sector healthcare and your ability to afford that and be okay as a disabled person that won't like have a for somebody who has mental health issues. You really don't want to, put all your cards on the table, or anybody who has anything that has, good days and bad days, quote unquote, which is most disabled people, I would say. Like, there's a real level of access problems there where, we're looking at a world where even in LA, I think less than 2% of buildings are actually wheelchair accessible. Like that, this is shocking when housing is supposed to be a human right for disabled people as well. And then how are they supposed to access that housing if they very literally can't access it, like physically? Like this is it to me. It's wild how much physical space isn't available to other disabled people. So it's important to note that I can't advocate for the entire disabled community because I have different accessibility needs than somebody who can't walk or somebody who is, has issues hearing or seeing. Like these are completely different things, but they're all kind of umbrellaed under quote unquote accessibility. And it's like, what does that really mean though? Where's the line and how is that enforceable? And the problem is the ADA is not enforceable. It's never enforced, or it would be. And you wouldn't see forced poverty existing because it's very well written into law that people shouldn't be spending any money on rent if they're living on a fixed income. But whatever, right? Like, so.
Yeah. Now, have you ever thought about going into politics or something to try to make some change in the legislation?
I try my best to work with legislation and talk with as many politicians and have open dialogues with them as I can. However, I don't think me running for office is where I'm needed. I don't think we need more white cis men just running America. In my opinion, I just don't think that's progress. Even if I have a neck tattoo, that's just a new coat of paint, right? Like it's not really that. I think in 2021 we've had enough of the cis white dude in Congress. Yeah, that's where I'm at with that.
So that's the reason.
Campaign,
That's the reason why. Or
it's
it's
not
just
the
not in your
reason. It's
heart.
just it's more. I'd rather have more representation in government for people who don't look like it, more or who look less like the founding fathers. You know what I mean? Like it's like these issues won't be addressed. Like certain issues like systematic racism, right? If we're going to talk about that, it's like that won't really be addressed until the people, like everybody always says, especially within abolition, the people closest to the problems are closest to the solutions, right? And so to me, it's just not really. I mean, yeah, I'm close to the problems, but at the same time, like I don't think I look like a solution, if I'm in office. That's just how I see it. It's just it's a weird thing where it's not like out of like I don't want to do that because I don't want to step out of bounds. It's more like, to be honest, if I'm a politician, I have to be really nice to cops. You know what I mean? Like that's part of your job. Like you have a daily meeting with cops. You know what I mean? Like police units. Like I just don't want to do that either. Like let's be real, I just can't. So it's like that's for somebody who's like way like they haven't got their teeth knocked out by the LAPD or whatever. You know what I mean? It's like that's okay then. Like, but like I can't shake the dude's hand. You know what I
You were
mean?
telling me about that. Some run-in with the police that caused your tooth to get knocked out. You told me when we were talking before that your tooth got knocked out when you were
shackled
by the police. Yikes!
With a firearm. Yeah.
So were they like
didn't
pulling
shoot
you
me.
over?
Oh no, they literally dragged me out my home, said I wasn't being detained, said that they had heard I was having suicidal thoughts. That's what they like to do with the disabled people or whatever. People who have no mental health history, like they can just kind of show up and say someone anonymously. It's less like liberal with that now, where they can just do
Mm.
whatever. But I would say, like, 6 years ago was a little bit different. And yeah, no, they dragged me out of my apartment though, and like it was literally like, hey, we heard you're thinking about suicide, so we came to make sure you're okay. And I'm like, please leave my property. And they're like, we can't do that. A social worker called us. I'm like, who? Like, I don't have a social worker. I don't even
Mm-hmm.
talk to them. I wish I had a social worker. Can you get me one? Like, can you do some public service or something? They're like, detain him. You know what I mean? And it was immediate.
Oh,
And then
wow.
they were like, oh, and you're like crash, but oh, okay. And I'm like, you knew that. What are you doing here? You know what I mean? And it was like, it was a situation. So yeah, I was not arrested technically. I was just handcuffed and
Oh,
kidnapped.
gotcha. Okay.
That's what happened by definition. I mean, I continuously was asking them, "Am I being detained?" They're like, "No." I'm like, "Why am I handcuffed?" They're like, "Well, for your safety and for ours." And
Mm.
I'm like, oh, "Okay, that sounds like I'm being." They're like, "Now we're gonna walk." I'm like, "So we're going in the cop car now, and I'm still not arrested." They're like, "You're still not under arrest," and I'm like, "And I'm not being detained." And they're like, "No." I'm like, "Then how am I being forcibly taken into a police vehicle?" And I'm like, "Where are we going?" And they're like, "We can't tell you that." I'm like, okay, so now we're really deep into a like lot of, we're talking about like, if you were a civilian, we're talking about kidnapping, we're talking about, this is a serious thing y'all are doing right
Right.
now. Like, you can't just, you have to arrest me at this point for it to be remotely legal. They did it, and they did not like that. And so yeah, they decided to beat me with the pistol instead.
Oh, wow. I'm sorry you had to go through that. That's awful.
It's
That
okay.
is very
People have
awful.
been through worse. People have been through worse.
They
So
have,
yeah.
but yeah, that's, doesn't make it okay either. But yeah, you are a musician also, so is that where your true passion lies with music?
Yeah, I love, no, I would say it's actually within, honestly, it's within the work I like to do with,
Is it? That's what I
evolution.
was
Yeah, I think
wondering.
I think I love that more, honestly. And that's a
Mhm.
weird thing, right? But so it's been hard for me, honestly, to balance my music with what I'm doing to, like, it's like I feel like lyrics can only change the world so much. Like I
Mhm.
have this saying I always use. I don't know. I think there's similar ones, but I'm pretty sure I have this one where it's like I invented it or whatever. And it's like the world can't change, will never change because of art, but without art, the world will never change. Like it, I think there's a lot
Mm.
of truth
Mhm.
to that. Like art will
Mhm.
never be the ball that starts rolling, but but culture is super important to any type of change. And I
It
think
is.
art and culture are synonymous. And so to me, it's interesting to have to balance between, especially a toxic industry like hip hop, where it's like I'm talking about liberation in this space where a lot of people are giving me a sideways look, because now it's like, they're like, "What do you mean the patriarchy?" You know what I mean? Like people aren't, I'll put it this way, not every rapper is a fan of this, patriarchy movement, and like we're not going to use these words anymore. They're like, "Crash, we hate you." Like they're not saying that, but
Mm.
they're going to be, and it's funny, and like you can see people getting like frustrated with it because it's like, they're losing, they not losing anything. It's more that they're like, they feel like they can't use certain content, or they might get, and
Mhm.
then like you have to stop worrying about it. Too many people are worried about cancel culture, but that's a sidebar like conversation. But it's like that's not what anyone's even talking about. I'm just saying I'm not gonna do that, and people still try to feel some type of way. But like with my album I'm working on, it's about how to organize. It's
Okay.
very academic in that sense. It's like a book form. So it's been hard to balance between that and then the actual work I do, because they're kind of one and the same. And in a place of like constantly bouncing back and forth. So I'm now wrapping up the album, which is great. And I'm very focused on that because it's otherwise I'm just on Zoom calls and then trying to write on Zoom calls. And then I'm like, yeah, actually, I don't like that verse anymore because I just heard about this. You know what I mean? And it's like, how many times
Okay.
am I going to paint over a masterpiece? Like, I have to stop doing it.
Oh, wow. Okay, and how long have you been doing music?
I've been making music since I was 18, and so like
Oh, wow.
I've just been on a 4 year hiatus, like because of a lot of different personal reasons, but mostly to do the work. And then I, got incarcerated for something I didn't even do, and then I got out, and then like I did and then I just went right back into doing the work and didn't really get back into music until I started this album up again. I was very disenfranchised with music for a little bit just because of how
Mhm.
toxic a lot of the like way culture works within music is very, very toxic and predatory. It's like the way um, the executives speak about people and to people. I just was like,
Mm-hmm.
nah, I can't right now. I'd rather just, do the work and never not even rap anymore. And then I was like, I miss music because I really love music. But
Right.
that's why I said, I'm like, I don't know. Like, I really don't. Like, sometimes I think like I really love this work more than music, which is hard to love anything more than music.
Hmm. It seems like it's a good outlet though, right? For me to get your feelings out and what you're going through, especially from the mental health aspect, a good outlet for people that may be feeling something similar. I saw that you did poetry at one point too. Is that kind of did that develop into the
Yes,
music?
yes,
Okay, yeah,
yes.
that
It
makes
was an
sense.
interesting transition for sure too, because then I had to. I think like I feel like the first 2 3 years, maybe even longer, that I was rapping, I was writing music, and then like I was spending more time deleting words and trying to make it fit that I would because I was so used to just writing poetry, and all of a sudden I have to be within a mathematical structure kind of right where I like to go against the grain and not
Hmm.
sound like other people, but that's still like something I had to adjust to, and I would say uh I was very like I would say I wasn't born with like the rhythm I needed to like just go straight into from poetry to rap on a beat. Like, you know what I mean? It was more like I had to learn how to write songs and not just poems. And like, I don't know if anyone really talks about that much, but it's an interesting transition to go through because you're
Hmm.
having to use so many less words.
Yeah, and so we're wrapping it up here, but I wanted to get your thoughts on what you thought some solutions would be to the problems. We talked about how, there's a need for restructure in our prison system and the court system. What is the solution? I mean, is abolition, abolishing it, you feel like the way, or what is the solution?
Well, here's no one has the solution yet. We need to start talking about the solution more. But when we talk about abolition, I want to note this because it's very important. It's a scare word, right? Like it's a trigger word. A lot of people hear it and they think burn everything down. Like that's a lot of the right
Mhm.
definitely hears that word and that's how they hear it. And it's weird to me because no one's trying to do that. Like it's very literally like, why would you? We're not the French, like it's like we're not going to do a revolution or something and then just be like, yeah, power to the people, and then be like, oh my God, we actually needed all these structures and systems. Let's just put different people in charge. It will be fine. And then like you're back to the thing you rebelled against, and the oppressed is now the oppressor or whatnot, right? And so like we're not trying to do that as much as it's like we're trying to replace these things with systems that are based on healing and community
Mhm.
and love and like liberation and things that are non-existent, to be honest, in today's very survival mentality and divided society that doesn't need to exist. So it's not about dismantling these systems. It is, but it's about reworking the systems and building something better in their place that's more
Yes.
effective and cares for the people. And how we're going to go about that is something where we need to have more conversation around that. We need to have more representation within government. And
Yes.
I think a lot of areas should be more autonomous than they are, where like I don't think there should be too much oversight. If people want to have their own little community of abolition and they, like go by their thing, that's fine. And everybody can find that. Or I mean, there's a million different ways it would work if it happened tomorrow, if the government was just like, let's have a cheaper thing going on because I want to abolish the U.S. military too. Imperialism's a problem. Like
Mhm.
we don't need to have boots on the ground in what 99% of the nations on the planet. You know what I mean? It's like
Mhm.
that's not a
Mhm.
thing that's necessary. I don't think that's good. I don't think it's healthy. I think we need to get rid of borders. I think we need to get rid of flags. I think people really need to be able to access spaces. I don't think you can only put people or um, animals inside of cages, or like I think you can put spaces inside of cages too, very literally, and that happens.
Mhm.
You see it with America, you see it with every border crisis, and then you see wars started over nothing besides a border. And like it's other reasons, but it's really a border and a flag that these wars start over. But if people like had a conversation, it wouldn't go down like that. And so to me, I don't think it's healthy for us to be in a place of divisiveness, because it will continue to normalize what we call human nature. And I don't think we're very clear on what human nature is. I think that we've always lived in a society that glorified oppression in some way, shape, or form, and violence and domination of other people, and
Mm-hmm.
acquiring property. And so I think the less that's normalized, and it will take generations of denormalizing that, obviously, but it's like, when that isn't normalized, when it's not like kill something just because you can eat it, like that probably creates the idea that I should just, maybe kill somebody randomly. Like when we're talking about people who are just, they say people are born that way. Like, and I'm not so sure. I think society is just being so predatory in nature. It's glorified literally in every culture, dominating your competition. Yet, like every society that is based on any remote form of capitalism glorifies the oppression of other people. Because if somebody's winning, somebody's losing really hard. That's kind of how
Mm-hmm.
capitalism
Mm-hmm.
works. And
Right.
yeah, so that's what I think it's those are the solutions, are really reworking the system and really reimagining how the system could work. And I don't think enough people are doing that, as much as people are like, we just need to say, we hate cops, we need to do this. And it's like, what's that do though? You know what I mean? It's like, I'm not saying a lot of people do that who know what they're doing, but there's a lot of irresponsible people who run around just kind of trying to make a statement that doesn't need to be made, and it harms the larger group. It's like people, no one, and they don't care. And this is typically white people who do this, and that's what I mean about there being issues when it comes to segregated white anti-racist and abolitionist organizations, because that can't be okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. And then tell us, you mentioned that you're working on music. How can people or find your music and get in contact with you if they would like to do so?
Right now I'm on a social media hiatus to focus,
Okay.
but my Instagram's at Crash Barbosa, and I'll be back soon. It's indefinite, but I'm sure I'll be back soon enough. Like my album's very close to being done. I'm just focusing on some things, so you can find my music by Googling me pretty much. A lot of my catalog is not up anymore because I
Okay.
want my album to be like highlighted. I honestly thought the album would be out like 4 months ago. Then I started working on clothing. I do too much at once. And so people really could just find information about me from my Instagram, from just Addie B. I mean, I'm pretty accessible person right now. I'm not, because my Instagram I'm not logging into, but usually I'll try to respond to every DM I get and whatnot. So yeah, that's a good way for anyone to find my content. I'm pretty sure all my music links are still on that page. Like, I don't think I deleted anything like that. So yeah, that's usually the best way to do it. My website's being built right now, and I have to rework that too, because the clothing part. So like a lot of things with the clothing kind of made me have to pivot a little bit, but yeah,
Mm-hmm.
adapt and evolve, right? So yeah, people can always just find me on Instagram at Crash Barbosa. Anywhere else, like if there's oppression happening, I'm somewhere around there, like making sure nobody's put in danger and things like that. So yeah.
Awesome. Definitely. Anything else you want us to know or anything else you want to share?
Not necessarily, not outside of the fact that, like, I really would love to just say that I appreciate you having me on, and that I really love that Jay uh, put us in touch. I think I got through this
Yeah.
without cussing once, which I really love.
Yay. All right. I
Right?
appreciate that. That's awesome.
Yeah, no, I got you. I was like, I'll try. I think I got you. Like, thank you for telling me though. Like, then I did. I would have been like, yep. Like,
All right. Well, good. Okay. Well, I appreciate you for stopping through Woke by Accident podcast. You're welcome here anytime. And we look forward to great things that you'll be doing in the future. So
thank you so
uh,
much,
you're
and have a great
welcome.
rest of your day.
You too. Thanks for listening, guys.
At this time, we are going to go ahead and conclude this episode. We do appreciate you listening. We do invite you to follow us on social media. On Instagram, it is Woke by Accident Podcast. On Twitter, it is Woke by. The Gmail is wokebyaccident@gmail.com. And we are available on all of your favorite streaming platforms. Please go out and follow us, share, leave a review, tell a friend. And every time you listen, we greatly appreciate it. Thank you again and take care.